Wilson and Ryan, guys, welcome to Mint. Thank you for being on. How are we doing?
Awesome. Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me here.
Ryan, what's up? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Guys, I'm very excited to have you on. There's a lot going on social right now with Elon Musk attempting to buy Twitter and conversations around data ownership and creators liberating themselves using Web3 primitives. So we have a lot to talk about. I always like to start with intros first. Okay, so Wilson and Ryan, who the hell are you guys? What does the world need to know about each of you? But more specifically, how did you get your start into crypto? We can start with Wilson and then we'll go to Ryan.
Sure. Um, this is Wilson, and I graduated from UC Berkeley, and that's how I met Ryan. We were in the same entrepreneurial club, and then I got into crypto in early 2017. We started off by creating a pretty novel, content blockchain called Lino blockchain, and then later on we also introduced the Live.tv, the first decentralized live streaming platform. And then we got acquired. After a year break, we tap into building CyberConnect right now, and I'm the co-founder of CyberConnect. And Ryan.
Yes. Well, I'm Ryan. Also graduated from Berkeley. Before this, me and Wilson, we did the venture together with Leo Blockchain, with DLive.tv, where we onboarded a bunch of creative streamers. And before that, I actually had a year and a half building a social application at Berkeley and Stanford, which didn't really work out, but I learned a lot during that experience. Yeah, that's what and my step into crypto is really the Steam blockchain, which was really kind of interesting back in 2017. I think that's where a lot of inspiration for DLive and Leo was coming from as well.
So this club that you guys met in at Berkeley, I also got started, I guess, with a lot of my entrepreneurial endeavors at the university as well. What is it about the club setting you think that kind of like prompts you into now working in Web3? I have my like hot take, but I'm curious to know how like starting in a club, meeting each other in a club, and how that's kind of like influenced your like product mindset and your entrance into Web3.
Yeah, I think we did a lot of company touring. We went to a lot of the startup companies in the Bay Area, and also some other areas as well, and that taught us a lot. We got a chance to actually um, see all those entrepreneurs and see them like grow their company from like zero to a multi-billion dollar company, and also how their point of view of product and the whole ecosystem, and also we learned um, how hard it is to actually start a company, and how important it is to create value and remain always keep going back to your mission, constantly, don't lose focus. Out of that, like we learned a lot from our previous entrepreneurs, and we got those opportunities based on the club. I was the president before Ryan, and then Ryan after me. And,
Mm,
we planned a lot of those trips to got the opportunities to talk to top entrepreneurs within the space. For Web3, we you know we didn't actually talk to so many other like Web3 companies back then, or blockchain companies back then, but we have like very good environment when we have a whole ton of discussion into Bitcoin and um, for example also the Steam blockchain, and that's how we got started.
got it. What about you, Ryan? So you joined as president after Wilson. I guess like what were some of like the initial companies that inspired you guys? I only asked this by the way because I was also in a similar situation like you guys, and I remember our club ended up going to Redwood, near Silicon Valley, and we got to tour all these like tech startup like offices. And I'll never forget seeing Box's office, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever come across, and it really like sparked a lot of my motivation and inspiration to kind of do and enter more of the tech scene specifically. I guess, were you guys already like tech centered when you guys entered the entrepreneurship club, or did that come afterwards?
I mean, I was super tech center, so
Okay.
before that I worked at Facebook and Google before as interns and did a bunch
Okay.
of hacking on my side. So I kind of knew what's going on, but like the really inspiration part was like some trips to those companies I've never heard of, but it turns out to be they are tackling something really interesting with very simple tech actually. A lot of them are
Got it.
just great businesses.
Got it. How'd you guys go about building D Live? Like, what was the inspiration for starting that initial project?
Yeah, Ryan. So you know, a live streaming platform, like we started off with the Lena blockchain, and then later on we brought on D Live.
Okay.
So for the the Lena blockchain, the fundamental problem that we were trying to solve was the unfairness or the conflict between content creators and platforms.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we got started, and we think live streaming it's a very good form of media where users will generate a whole bunch of smaller transactions, and you can leverage the blockchain with that a lot, and also prevent a lot of the just botting and and you know uh, like just spamming
Mm-hmm.
the incentive system, because people are actually paying for tips or donations. Yeah, that's how we actually got started.
Got it. Got it. Part of my journey into content creation started with live streaming. Prior to Mint, I started this like Tuesday
Right.
weekly segment called Blockchain and Booze. It started during COVID, and the whole idea was to kind of like bring people together over a drink while we were locked indoors. And that was like the first step for me into content creation, and then kind of like inspired me to go be my own creator as we're doing right now with Mint. So now that you guys have pivoted into kind of building CyberConnect, it's actually quite exciting for me because a lot of the ethos behind Web3 social, and I guess it's more for you guys to answer, but I very much align with it, like being your own bank for the most part, owning your data, owning your audience, a lot of these primitives that we'll talk about. But I guess before we even get into there, before I answer those questions for you, why social? Like why tackle the problems in Web3 social? Why you guys specifically?
First of all, like why social? I think right now Web3 and blockchain in general are focusing so much on the financial industry. We got all those tokens floating around, and NFTs. Um, but in order for Web3 to actually become more mainstream adopted, I think social it's going to be a huge part of it. Without social, like it's going to be just a financial game, and I don't think that's the whole purpose of Web3. um and for us, like we have years of experience building social platforms, tackling on problems on the infrastructure design for data and also content distribution and financial incentives. So we back in D Live and Lena, we work with more than 60,000 live streamers, so we know how it is like to be a streamer, and also the demand from users. Um, yeah, so and also we were a pretty Web3 native team. We have been in the industry for more than 5 years already. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. Like, why us?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess why you guys specifically, but I guess why do you align with the problems in Web 2, like Web 2 social, and how you try to solve them in Web 3?
Yeah,
Because when you talk about a founder's journey, right, you really have to align with like the purpose and the mission that you're trying to build towards, right? And at least for me personally, I can't go into something because there's a lot of money and just commit to it and build something. Like I really need to align with the foundation in terms of what I'm building for, like the purpose, right? So that was kind of like so it does answer the question, but I guess also from like Ryan, for you specifically, like why the interest to build in Web3 social? Like what are the problems in Web2 social that have inspired you guys to go and build into Web3 social?
Well, I can. What I think the social scene in Web 2 has reached this like top of the S curve where the acceleration of growth has just stopped. Like for the past probably 10 years, like there's very little innovation except from TikTok. Probably like all the same platform
Mhm.
you've been using for the past 10 years are still around. And back like 8 years ago, when I was building the social application on campus, it's like yeah, you can build a great app, but like nobody will use it because everybody has their own circle on those platforms,
Mhm.
and they are just controlling everything, building up their moat by having those users on the platforms. And you just cannot build a better user experience and expect people to come. That's the point. Like, there's no innovation happening, like very little innovation happening in social scene. And having the ownership back to the hands of users and making platform less of a centric place for those interactions to happen, but more like a bottom to top kind of approach where people can own different part of the data, different part of the stack, could really be maybe the beginning of something very interesting on Web3 social, instead of just hoping we're gonna be around with Instagram and TikTok for the next
Mhm.
20 years.
So you're telling me it's not going to be a good idea to be with Instagram and TikTok for the next 20 years for them to dominate the entire social scene? I don't
Well, right,
know.
like yeah.
I think yeah, and I want to add on a little bit on the problem. Like I mean, TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, those are great platforms.
Mhm.
But fundamentally, the problem is like they own all of your data, and therefore they own your channel. They own all the creators channel. No matter how many years you spend times to build on, let's say 1 million follower,
Mhm.
those are not your data. And what we're building could actually solve the problem. We give back your channel to users, and especially it's going to be super meaningful for influencers because
Mm.
those followers are actually their social capital. That's how we call it. And then CyberConnect will enable your mobility of your social capital, meaning you could go to another platform and still have the same amount of following because you actually own those data. And that's going to change the whole game. That's going to solve the relationship problem and internal fundamental conflict between creators, users, and platforms, because now we're on the same table. Like you provide your service features, I own my data, and you don't have the dominant right bargaining power against me. So I get more control over what I want to do and what I want to do with my platform. That could potentially solve the problem with demonetization, unfair traffic distribution, and a
Mm.
lot of those stuff.
Got it.
So that's a huge problem, and um, yeah.
Got it. So how do you guys kind of understand the current state of Web3 social? Like, where are we? It's 2022. We're seeing headlines of Elon Musk wanting to buy Twitter. We're seeing all these purpose-driven revolutions of content creators issuing NFTs, tokenizing themselves, building an audience on chain. We're seeing like grassroots movements kind of like sparking up that may lead into something bigger, right? And I know you guys have over 1 million users on your social graph specifically. So what better person to kind of ask, like, what is the current state of Web3 social? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's exciting to see all those creators and application trying out different use cases. But in general, like Web3 social is still in its pretty early stage, and I think mostly because the infrastructure is not 100% ready yet, and that's why we started with building CyberConnect as the social graph infrastructure for developers. Um, and it has a huge potential for social application and content distribution platforms to get into Web3 and be more crypto native. Um, for example, like NFTs could solve the problem with a lot of the copyright problem and the loyalty split problem. And then what we do, like, what I just mentioned previously, could
Mhm.
solve channel ownership problem and data ownership problem and the mobility of your social capital. Those are the one thing that is very different than like between Web3 and Web2 would be Web3 would be very user centric, meaning users are going to use their wallet as their account system and try to own everything. instead of platforms owning everything. And I think that's going to change the whole thing. And yeah.
Got it. What do you guys think about the current like offer for Elon Musk to buy Twitter? Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very interesting. But I think like Elon right now, Elon Musk, it's holding on the deal because of some
Mhm.
data. He's suspicious about like the 5% of true owner
Right.
that Twitter claimed to have. The 5%, like less than 5% of bots. But yeah, I mean, I personally I love Elon Musk. He's kind of like my role model.
Yeah.
I bought in Tesla super early on. Um, yeah, but I think he's trying to somehow, if let's say Twitter, it doesn't really matter whether it's Elon Musk or someone else. If Twitter become more and more decentralized, enabling users to own their channel, I think that's generally a exciting thing to see.
Mhm.
And by seeing their like first step of enabling recognizing the NFT as avatar for their Twitter Blue, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like to see more and more mainstream Web2 major giants to adopt this system. But fundamentally, what would change is the data problem. The question here is like when and how they would get to a point when they're willing to give up all those data back to where it belongs, like users.
So that's the question. Like, is there an incentive to do that? Like the way Twitter is run today, it's very much like an advertisement model, right? And there's power behind having so much data, not for Twitter, not just for Twitter, for all these like main Web2 social platforms and audio platforms, and a lot of these creator first platforms. Is there an incentive to democratize and make the social graph like open source like he wants to and give users ownership of their data? I guess from a Twitter point of view, like, do you see that world coming into picture from how things are run today?
I think in the short term, it's going to be extremely difficult
Okay.
because Twitter, as a public company, their major goal is actually to make money and maximize their profits. And by owning those data, they remain as the dominant social media platform online ever. But if they could just think a little bit more longer term, um, and see how the Web3 world could potentially be much bigger than just a social media platform. They could maybe change their mind and try to convince their board members, we're chasing after something that's going to happen like within the next 5 years or 10, and we want to remain as the leading technology firm, instead of being left behind by the whole revolution of
Right.
Web3. I think that's the probably the only potential. And if Elon Musk actually uh, buys Twitter, I think that he might be the person. But right now, it seems like it's not happening. The deal is off.
So yeah, it does seem like the deal is obviously on standby, given all the botting issue and the spam issues. I guess that's a big problem in Web2 social. Like it's hard to authenticate users and it's hard to prevent all these bots and spammers. Like if you tweet MetaMask right now, you're going to get a bunch of bots saying that they're MetaMask support, right? And it's like it makes the experience less enjoyable. So I guess my question to you guys, in a Web3 social standpoint, how do you mitigate bots? How do you mitigate spammers? Like what is the formula for defeating these bad actors online?
Yeah. So very interesting question. We're exploring to that constantly. And one thing that we're trying out is like we recently come out with a product called Link 3.2.
Okay.
And one thing that we do is to verify manually with other projects that's trying to create their own page on on Link 3.2. And the thesis behind it, it's we want to start establishing a group of trusted account, which is address based. And then starting from this group of trusted accounts, they're going to start making connections with different accounts. For example, the trusted account could follow 10 other accounts, and that would create another group of trusted accounts. And starting from this, trusted standard group, expand the trust beyond that, and that would ultimately create a very healthy environment of real human engagement account system. And also another way to do it is to use the assets that we have with tokens and NFTs to increase the cost of faking a bot account. For example, you could almost definitely say, like, if your address has an, let's say, CryptoPunk or an ape, um, it's going to be a real user behind it. It's not going to be a bot. You couldn't like 10 million bots based on those assets. Yeah, so that's our way to explore into it.
Got it. Got it. So another thing we keep talking about is ownership. And ownership is a big topic that I've consistently talked about. I feel like on almost every episode, because the way I think about ownership, it's still a gray area. Like what does ownership really mean on chain? So from a creator's point of view, okay, when you say a creator can own their data in Web3, what does that mean? Like what does that visually mean? What's the benefit of that? And how do you think about that process?
Yeah, I think the example. Yeah, let me take like TikTok or YouTube as
Okay,
an
sure.
example again. The ownership means that you own your followers. Um, for example, you already have your YouTube channel, and if you want to create your TikTok channel the other day, and you could have the same amount of followers, and that's essentially how we're defining the ownership of data. Without the ownership of data, you would never be able to do that unless um, YouTube somehow change their mind and give you all the right to all those data. And they will have, like, those two platforms that will have to be fitted into one account system, which is not happening. But the difference is here in Web3, it's we have this like universally pretty well adopted account system that is wallet based, address based. So everything that become much more interoperable. So when you are establishing relationship between your followers, that's address to address, and that piece of data, it's valuable because it could be brought onto other platforms, and it could be the same meaningful relationship.
Got it.
And
Got it.
yeah.
So, Ryan, I guess from your point of view, like being more the tech-minded person here and the CTO of CyberConnect, how does this work from a more infrastructure level? Because a lot of what CyberConnect is about is creating an ecosystem that allows developers to build on top of and to build applications so that you can take your following from one place to another. So when you're designing this protocol, this ecosystem, what goes into actually making it successful? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, visually, like only a piece of data, it kind of means like I can show you the data without like showing you a central platform of displaying the data. Like I can tell you that I have this amount of followers without relying on YouTube telling you or telling us that that's the amount of followers that I have. But instead, I can show you an Etherscan, or I can show you something that's very neutral. You can replace it easily and shows the data that lives on blockchain or lives in a decentralized store, which everybody can rely or trust on. So to design the system that we have, we aim for a very scalable, very performance system, and also making sure that all the data integrity are kept safe and all the data are always available, so that it can be like, oh, so Atom is growing fast, and I want to shut Atom down. Like we can just take away that piece of data and throw it in the garbage can. That doesn't work, and we have to make sure that all the followers Atom has here always belong to them. Like it has to be initiated from some account that's authenticated to initiate some action. So in the end, it's very similar to what we had. Was very similar. We started out with the on-chain approach to save everything on chain on Polygon or on Solana, some cost effective way. But then in the end, we actually have a much more performance system that's sufficiently decentralized for now, so that we can onboard the amount of users that we have, like to almost to 1 million users right now.
Got it.
and all the data are safely backed on those decentralized stores are like Arweave, so people can always rely on, okay, this is not just CyberConnect telling me what data is, but also everybody can check on Arweave.
So let's go back to this concept of ownership for a minute, okay? When you say you own your data, the way I think about it is, and I'm testing in public here. So every single season I issue free NFTs to my audience, okay? And I do this in an effort to kind of give back to them as a thank you, and also to solidify their participation early on in the podcast. As I grow as a creator, as the platform grows, they can prove that they were there before the people who joined in season 10, for example. And that's what I think about of owning an audience. When they own an asset that came from you, from your smart contract address, that NFT, that token sits in your wallet. That's a form of ownership from the creator to the listener, to the fan, right? And with that, and I don't think it exists yet, but with that, I feel like I could tap into data that otherwise may have been restricted from more of like Web2 platforms, for example. So let's think about this out loud. I would love to brainstorm with you guys. Okay, so over 6,000 NFTs were collected, just as the example. Now, through that, I could see really interesting information that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to see if it was coming, let's say, from Spotify or Apple Music or Instagram or Twitter. For example, and the most important metric I'd argue is like net worth, right? Like how rich, how affluent is my audience, for example, right? Which is super important because as I create more content, as I create a better experience for my fans, I want to know these things because it will kind of dictate how I lead my content direction, for example. And that's a metric. I remember doing like Facebook ads back in the day when I was doing like amateur e-commerce and shit. I remember that was a data point that Facebook would never really give me. I would always have to find like zip codes and try to find like where are they living? Like, are they in Beverly Hills? So if they live in Beverly Hills, I can target people in Beverly Hills, and based on that, they may have money, for example, right? But with this, it's a little bit different. Like, am I thinking about this the right way? Are you guys thinking about that similarly? Like, guide me here.
I think that's definitely one of the potential usage of it. And with with the connection data that we are establishing here, you could also come up with analytics for your follower base,
Right.
and because everything is address based, but other than like their wealth and their assets or tokens, I'll be more interested in who they are and how they're connected with other communities, like who they really present them, like how they present themselves into the space. Because the Web3, it's not going to be like might not be as that ad driven as Web2.
Sure.
So I'll say like the potential of leveraging those data and knowledge to build a community that it's really tight and loyal. It's a much better potential use of those data.
So
And
for example, Wilson, so let's use again the NFTs, like the 6,000 free NFTs, for example. So based off that, seeing what part of community, which communities they align with, which communities they're part of. So with that kind of like logic, I can then go and see, okay, how many of the people that collected my free NFT also hold a Bored Ape, for example,
I mean,
right? How many of them collected a specific POAP from ETH Denver, for example, right? These types of scenarios, right? Can you elaborate on that for a little bit?
Yeah, Ryan.
Yeah.
This is something I've been dreaming about. So before this, there's no way for you, like from Spotify's data coming back to you. There's no way you can tell if they like this particular YouTuber, right? Like, there's no way to tell what's their preference or what their interest lies outside this platform. But with the same address being used across different platforms, you can tell, oh, maybe this is also an NFT trader. I can have a better demographic view of all those different users and find those interest groups that could never exist before. Like now, probably you have a better view of, oh, maybe they're all NFT collectors, or maybe they're all just plug farmers that doesn't really create a lot of value. Or you can discover some interesting communities around who are the other people that also listen to Adam's Ment podcast and also share some experience similar as what I did. Like, what if I can find all the other holders that to this Mint 5, Season 5, but also with also holding, let's say, East Denver a POAP, we've all been there. We've all found out about this Mint 75. That creates a real unique group of people that can have a great conversation.
What's up, guys? Adam Levy here. Sorry for the quick pause, but I wanted to recognize a couple of our NFT sponsors who are helping make this episode a reality. They are Coinvise and Mint Songs. First up, on Coinvise, you can create a personal or community-owned social token on Ethereum. Coinvise also helps you create incentives through token rewards and bounties, NFT business models, and bot integrations for Discord. Discover more by visiting coinvise.co today. Next up, we have Mint Songs, who is home to over 1,200 music artists in Web3. Check out the Mint Songs marketplace to support, collect, and connect with artists creating Web3 communities around their music via NFTs. In June 2022, about next month, Mint Songs will be launching their much-anticipated V2 marketplace on Ethereum, which aims to make Web3 even more accessible to music artists. Follow along on Twitter at MintSongs or check out mintsongs.com to learn more. All right, back to the episode. So it's funny. I've been talking about this like scenario because there aren't any tools out there just yet that empower creators on a very simple level. Like there's NFT analytics, there's Dune analytics where you need to know SQL to kind of query data to kind of learn more about these addresses. But there's nothing that's like plug and play that you can just copy and paste an address and boom, you get your answers like that, right? And I did this experiment. I think it was at ETH Denver with this artist. Her name is Queen George. She's an independent music artist, and we put together a concert essentially at ETH Denver. We issued tickets as NFTs on Polygon, and the sole intention was to try to get in Growth Hack like a few hundred core Ethereum collectors to come and attend the concert, because at the concert we had the opportunity to mint a one-of-one song that people could kind of scan their phone and kind of get the link from the QR code. And we did this entire like funnel, this entire experience, and it made us think afterwards, like, wow, like there's a whole interesting like opportunity over here for Queen George as a music creator and to tap into data that she otherwise wouldn't have had access to through Twitter or through TikTok or through Spotify or Apple Music, because their power comes from the data, for example, amongst other things. So yeah, I'm interested to see how this kind of like plays and plays forward. Another question I want to ask you guys is, a lot of I guess what Web2 social platforms aim to do is empower the creators, because without the creator there is no platform. Like that's an argument. So in Web3, what kind of tools do you think creators need to kind of liberate their creativity? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think we already mentioned one of the most fundamental
Right.
Infrastructure, the data ownership,
Mm-hmm.
and then other than that would be a whole bunch of explore exploring into like NFTs, I'll say, and then something that we're building like Link3. I think that could potentially become a hub for creators to manage their community. I think for Web3, it's not too much of solving the problem of content delivery. It's kind of like solving the problem. It could better solve the problem of how you form a tight community, almost like your VIP group of fan base. And you could leverage a lot other tools like NFT and for example, like we recently read the newest essay from Vitalik talking about like soulbound token.
Sure.
That's something pretty interesting as well. If we come up with a a soulbound token, and that could become another tool to give you the badge, which is non-transferable, but give you the status of being Adam's #1 fan.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that would be interesting. Yeah, a lot to explore into. But those are the examples that I could come up with on my head right now.
So speaking about soulbound tokens, before this like keyword even came out, this new buzzword, all of the NFTs are non-transferable. Like it's intentionally made so that you can't sell them on secondaries for the sake of being able to solidify that this wallet address interacted with the podcast at this date, at this time, and that's it. It's there forever, And there's something special to that. And it's funny because now you see on OpenSea, like if you go to the smart contract address, you try to see people sell it for more and it won't sell because it is non-transferable, right? So I think this concept of non-transferable NFTs with no secondary value are still very new and very early. But I think solidifying one's participation or engagement with a creator is a great use case for them, for example. I want to talk about virality for a minute, because virality is a very key component of social, of course. Arguably, TikTok's like killer feature, or one of them at least, is they're able to make almost any creator like famous, like, and you reach thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of followers really quickly. Like they have an interesting model. And I only bring them up because I think a lot about this in Web3. Like, how does virality work on a decentralized level? Does the decentralization affect the widespread, I guess, reach of content? Is it independent of one another? And I only ask this from a point of view because I don't know, right? Like, you guys are the experts here. But I figure if a Web3 social platform were to get legs, it would need that viral component to attract creators and to build an audience. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's a you know, something that we have been working on. It's what we call the social data network, and that includes a whole bunch of recommendation system. I think TikTok, it's really good at recommendation algorithms, and that's like one of the key components of how they make your video content viral, by pushing the right content to the right people. And that's what we think it's called, like, interest graph. You have the social graph, that's your connection. Your interest graph, it's like what contents you would be interested, what other people that you're not following that might be interested in you. And that could be built on top of the social graph. And right now, we're trying to aggregate a lot of the data from on-chain and off-chain. For example, whether you hold the same poll app badge, or whether you voted on the same snapshot proposal, whether you are holding the same NFT collection. Those kind of things could add up together to build up a pretty good interest graph for each account and each user. And based on the social graph, like the secondary connection and the third, multiple degree connection could also add on to that interest graph and empower a better version of recommendation system as well. So I think there's a chance in Web3, the whole recommendation system could work collectively instead of just belonging to one single platform. And that could potentially change the the basics of the how influencers or creators get virals, and they could have more information onto those supposedly black box algorithm.
Yeah. I mean, on the other side, though, if you make these algorithms accessible to multiple platforms and you welcome competition, like heavy degrees of competition, because if you can take, for one, you're following anywhere, and then on top of that, you can apply the same, like, how did you call it? You said interest
graph.
Interest graphs. You can take that same interest graph and implement it onto a different platform, I guess. And how do platforms build a moat? Like, how do you build stickiness?
I think, yeah, that's actually like how we imagine the future.
Okay.
I think platforms should build their moat based on the ability of creating a good product experience instead of just taking data, building up those data wall. Building great experiences, and also natively, when user go to your domain, when user go to a website, when user download your app, those traction, those network are your moat. But down to the bottom, they should compete against each other based on the user experience and the service that they provide. And that's a very healthy competitive environment.
Got it. Really quick.
I think that's what happened in DeFi as well. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Ryan. What were you going to say?
Oh, I think that's what happened to DeFi as well, right? Like, it's, apart from what happened on Terra and Luna, but people would have their, like, you're not bound to a DeFi protocol because they hold your assets. Not like what banks do, right? Like, you probably only have like one or two banks you ever worked with, but you probably have way more DeFi protocol you play around with, and they all compete for a better service, better yield, supposedly, through their interesting
Ponzi-nomics.
But it actually creates more innovations, right? Like, there is way more DeFi protocols that's in existence than banks that do have a significant amount of traffic because people, they don't hold users asset, they actually just provide a better service.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that gets me into our next point. The market did take like a dipper for the most part. How do you guys think that affects, I guess, education, how that affects content creation, and just more widespread creator growth in Web3?
I think for sure, the general market it's going to be less interested because
Okay.
of the market. Um, but I don't see the trend changing because the basics are not changing. Um, we saw great talented teams working on products, um, and efforts and money that put into projects that try to build a wider range of adoption. Yeah, yeah, but when the market is down, it's down. Like things will tend to grow like slower, but not like stop growing. And I'm just happy that like within the last couple of years, um, a lot of the smart money and smart people are getting into the industry, and I saw that still happening even when the market is down. People are starting to clearly understand this could be the potential future and this could be a huge change. And it's not a game of just 1 year or two, it's a game of a decade or two, or even longer. So yeah, like for us, we're here for the long term. We're
Hmm.
well prepared for a bear market. We're well funded with a very top group of selective investors. We just recently announced our Series A.
Yeah, congrats on
So
that. It's huge.
thanks.
What was it? 15 mil?
Yeah.
No big deal. Just a quick 15 mil. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. So I think it's not like necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes when the market gets like too hot,
Hmm.
it creates a lot of problem. The problem with Luna, it's the same thing. I think it's too hot, and the bubble grow like too fast,
Hmm.
um, or affecting so many other people. If we got more of a reasonable market sentiment, users and products and teams will have more time to testify to a lot of the experiments happening in the space. Therefore, um, I think it's healthier in the long term.
Ryan, you agree as well? Or you have a different take?
Yeah, well, I agree. It's good to have those cycles where people can just take a breather and think outside of NFTs to launch this week, right? Like in the hot market, people are just launching DeFi protocols and NFTs, and everybody's
Right.
aping into speculating them, and you always FOMO, like you always feel like you're missing out. But actually, it's just there's nothing much happening in those really hot markets. But like really, the build phase is during the bear market, like what OpenSea did, what like Uniswap did during 2018, 2019, where nobody cares about NFTs or DeFi, and they just keep on building, and then that's what's happening next. So it's
Yeah.
great to see those times like that people can slow down and build, and also we get less bots as well. Like we were
Oh,
heavily.
really?
Hopefully, we get fewer bots in the.
Are
Yeah,
you saying
it's
on Twitter in general or on CyberConnect?
everything. Every channel that we have on CyberConnect, on Twitter,
Yeah.
like there's like way too many bots.
Yeah.
Hopefully, when the
Just
bots
like,
start.
Yeah, the funniest spammers are the sirs, like hi sir, like hello sir, like all those random DMs. One thing you guys keep mentioning, and I guess between the three of us, we kind of understand what we mean. But for those who don't know, what is a social graph? Can you quickly define that, either of you?
yeah, yeah, sure. So a social graph, it's basically represent the relationship between users or entities or
Okay,
organizations. Um, um, a quick example would be your following or followers on TikTok, on Instagram. That's your social graph. Your connections on Facebook, your local address book on your cell phone. Those are your social graph.
got it, got it. So when you think about like data and the data collected through a social graph, right, in an infrastructure like you guys are developing, what does security look like? So because blockchains are so accessible and so open, um, I feel like it's a threat to privacy at times, especially when users connect their ENS to their Twitter profiles as well. And of course, I mean, I do that. I'm guilty of that. I do that, but I feel like I do it strategically where everything is not on there. So how do you guys think about security and privacy on a social setting when everything is inherently public?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty obvious problem, but it's not necessarily the most important or urgent problem. I think a lot of the social media or data are supposed to be public. Like for example, your Twitter. But if you link it to your wallet, you better do it with your wallet that it's you are comfortable with the public knowing it. And the more challenging question would be privacy data that's really sensitive, like for example um your close circle, like friend list, or your social graph in your messaging app. Those should be a more sensitive data. And for those data, first of all, it should not be stored on any publicly accessible blockchain. And we have seen some great efforts in the encryption
Mhm.
vertical. For example, like ZK rollup is great, and they're improving a lot on their scalability. And once we get to a point when we have more, you know, encrypted and privacy reserved infrastructure ready, we'll start to see more use cases and applications tackling into the more sensitive kind of use cases.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So that comes to my next question then. So because the hype around social media right now with Elon buying, it's creating more conversations and creating more awareness in general. And with that comes more competition for like Web3 social graphs. How do you guys think about the competitive landscape? Is it a one size fits all, like one winner? Can multiple winners exist? Do you see like interoperability between competitors? Is that a thing? How do you think about that?
I think it's possible to have like multiple networks.
Okay.
Some serve for maybe, you know, for example, you could have like a subgraph for the gaming community
Hmm.
in a very specific use case, and you could have another graph for content driven platforms. Um, uh, in terms of like competition, I think it's not, it doesn't worry us that much. Like I believe we were the first one out there, and where they accumulated the most data, and that would create a huge network effect. But if someone else come in and create another type of social graph, as long as they provided a good service or in certain verticals, I mean, it makes sense to have like multiple parties providing different type of graph.
Got it. How do you guys think about development on a social graph? Because a big part of CyberConnect is empowering development groups and developers in general to build applications using the social graph. So I guess my first question is, what does that look like from an infrastructure level? Like, how do you empower a group of individuals to build on top of something? Because I'm not a developer, I don't understand that. And two, what are some of the more like successful applications using CyberConnect today?
Okay. Ryan can take the first question. I can
Okay,
probably take the second.
go for it,
Well, yeah,
Ryan.
for the developer, well, we want the experience for developers to be like, let's say if they're building, let's say if they're building a game, they're gonna publish it
Hmm.
on Steam, where they don't want to manage all the social graph, like because people have friends on Steam and they can immediately tap into the existing user base and how are people playing the same game together. So we're providing those SDKs for developers to build when they're like, let's say if they're building a game, they can tap into CyberConnect's social graph with the SDK and the APIs. And when they release the game, all the existing users can bring their existing friends and followers and followings to this new game and start playing with those existing friends that they know. And for any social applications, it's the same. It's like back in 2010 when applications are
Hmm.
building on top of like Facebook, sign in with Facebook, and you get all the signups, new signups their friend list, and you can tap into that graph and do interesting stuff around them, like what Tinder did with early Facebook's integration, where they were trying to recommend the second degree friend, like the friend of your friend, the friend of your friend to you in the Tinder feed. So
Wait, they were doing that?
doing that, and they were also blocking out all your friends on Facebook and not showing their profile on yours.
That makes sense.
So
That's really funny, though. I didn't know that.
yeah, those are like the early days of Facebook, what people are building on top, and it actually
Oh,
provides a tremendous amount of value, right? Like, so that's what we want the experience to be like for the developers. They can easily tap into, because we don't own those data. All the users own the data, right? They have to say to, I
right.
want the developer to use my data, give me a better user experience.
Got it. Got it. So with that, what are some of like the more successful applications?
Right now we have like more than 20, 25 developers are already integrated with
Okay.
CyberConnect. And I'll give you a couple examples. Like, for example, the Project Galaxy ID, they're already using it. So when you following each other through those Project Galaxy ID, you're establishing connections on CyberConnect. And we created that, we help them to bootstrap the whole ID relationship between their ecosystem, within their ecosystem. And another more intuitive example would be, for example, Metaphoro. They create a structuralized forum for different projects, and also they have their own forum. And for example, one of their forum example would be the Open DAO. And so by integrating with CyberConnect, first of all, once a user log in, even for the first time logging into the forum, you already know like what kind of what other addresses, what other users they're following, and therefore you could do a recommendation of a list of topic that they might be interested in, or a list of posts from those your following accounts, um, and then also establish the connection there in a decentralized manner. We also empower that as well. So essentially, like a lot of the apps leverage CyberConnect as for two reasons. Number one is to solve the co-starting problem. Whenever you want to create a network, just like how in the mobile era, when a lot of the mobile apps are trying to request access to query your data from your local address book, right, to bootstrap their
Hmm.
initial network. But within Web3, within this address-based account system, there's no such thing. And therefore, we're here to provide that, to help them to solve all those problems, and could immediately provide the user experience with an existing social graph. And then number two, just be aligned with the ethos of building a decentralized application. You need to give back the data ownership back to users. And if they try to do it by themselves, it's going to be problematic. They will have to do everything that we built all over again. And but by using just simply our SDK, it's super easy for them um, to provide that service.
Got it. Do you guys have any like specific visions for applications that you'd like to see built? Like, do you have any specific ideas that you have yet to see someone kind of encounter, problems you have yet to see someone solve, that you guys would be interested in funding, for example?
Yeah. For example, like we're building Link 3, and I truly believe this is a great um applications with great demand. And some other potentials as well, like for example, like right now, addresses doesn't mean anything at all. Like um some of users already have their ENS, and you kind of know their name, but it needs to be, the address and account has to be able to represent somehow a identity and status. And That's a great opportunity for projects to tap into, and create like platforms, maybe like LinkedIn, or some other opportunities would be like content platforms. I think that's pretty cool as well. because with all the assets that you could leverage with, it's much easier for content creators to generate profits, and establish a very loyal group of fans. um, and obviously
Hmm.
uh, games would generate a whole ton of social networks. um, People enjoy playing games, and it's very intuitive. You make friends in different games, and that's how we build up the whole network.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. I guess as we kind of wrap up the conversation, I want to leave you guys with one final thought that let's think for macro for a minute, okay? We talked about data ownership, we talked about protocols, we talked about interoperability, we talked about what creators, I guess, kind of like look like in Web3. I want to think about big picture. Like, what does the grandiose vision for Web3 social look and feel like?
Yeah. mm, I think, first of all, we're going to have a lot of the Web3 native and decentralized platform providing services that we have already on the Web2, and also services that we never seen before. For example, like NFT kind of iteration. Um, and second of all, like those, like by defining those like decentralized platform, I
Hmm.
think it's still fundamentally the key is to enable like a user-centric web instead of a platform-centric web. So that's starting from the bottom, like the account system, the data ownership, and then later on, like empowering all the interoperability for users to choose and cross all those platforms, and then eventually evolve into a real user-centric app. That's, some people call it the metaverse, but I think like this, user-centric concept, it's basically the backbone of the future that we're imagining.
Hmm. What about you, Ryan? How do you think about that?
Giving people the ability to own stuff that holds value, or it doesn't really need to hold value, but exists in a longer horizon, might really change how people interact. Like, there's no way for you to show what your, I don't know, I've never used MySpace before, but there's no way for anyone who has used MySpace before to show what they have done there. But probably in 10 years, you can still show people that, well, I was the one of the participants in Adam's, well, Men's season 5 because I have this NFT. I think that kind of unlocks a lot of interesting social interactions and provides different context and gives people the ability to show what they're interested in, where the community they belong, and using all these different user-owned assets gives applications the ability to build stuff that doesn't necessarily have to be like from the ground up. So
Got
CyberConnect
it.
provides very interesting components to that, a very crucial infrastructure for them to build the graph, the social graph, while they can always leverage on the existing like assets and NFTs that people have owned throughout the years. That's just my thinking on this. That's like never could happen on Web2.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
Adam,
yeah, go
just
ahead.
a little bit into it. I noticed that you asked the question about macro. So I think people might not notice how important it is for users to own data and also all those assets. On Web2 era, we have billions of users on the internet, and none of them have the rights over any kind of property. All of the thing that we do on Web2 was, we purchase services from different giant platforms. You purchase that equipment, you purchase this membership, but all those are services. And on Web2, user and creators will be able to own stuff, including their own channel and data. And those are considered as the core means of production. And by enabling users to own, like basically enabling them to have the property rights, and plus, we have all those smart contracts to facilitate transactions and cooperation between different parties. I think those are the two key fundamental elements to create a free market and motivate individuals to, you know, to maximize their productivity in the long run. And I think that's the juice of the free market as well, like enabling, you know, individual property rights, and also, you know, you have some kind of like consensus over contracts and legislation, to facilitate all kind of you know, collaborations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's changed the whole thing. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I'm a big believer in this vision of kind of like creators owning their audience. It's obviously a lot of what I talk about on the podcast. Ways of owning your audience is by issuing assets and forms of tokens for people to collect. And with that, you unlock all sorts of data and interesting like benefits that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to experience on traditional platforms. So this entire vision of a user-owned internet, of a user-owned social graph, of people being able to kind of control their audience, not from like a negative point of view, but more so they have more ownership and say as to how they reach them, how they grow with them, how they build with them, how they interact with them, and be able to take their audience from one platform, move it to another. Because like if you guys recall, for everyone that's listening, when TikTok came out, a lot of the Instagram artists that migrated to TikTok weren't able to build as viral kind of like followings as those who were on TikTok prior, right? So then you have this rise of brand new influencers and brand new individuals that are kind of like leading the charge on culture, on pop culture, and it affects, like it messes up, and now you're forced as a creator to create content on TikTok and then build an audience on TikTok, then create content on Instagram and build an audience on Instagram, and then on Twitter and then build an audience on Twitter, and then on Spotify and all these different places. And it just gets, it's like way overbearing. For me, myself, personally, I already feel that pressure. I feel that pressure trying to do things on TikTok and build an audience on TikTok, and that I have to abide by these specific algorithms just to build some type of audience, when I wish I could just kind of take everybody that's collected my NFT in the past, bring them over to one platform, and be able to grow with them simultaneously in a new form of content. So I really get this vision as a creator. It really makes sense. I'm excited to see how you guys kind of tackle this in the future, especially with this new Series A. And I guess before you wrap up, like, where can we find more about CyberConnect? Where can we learn more? And where can we find you guys specifically online?
Yeah. So go to our Twitter, CyberConnect, and then our website as well, cyberconnect.me. And the best way is actually to go to link3.2/cyberconnect.
Okay.
It has everything. It has my profile, Ryan's profile, and everything that you need to know about CyberConnect.
Cool. We'll put that in the description. What about you, Ryan?
Well, yeah, I think that wasn't said it well. Go to link3.me, you'll find everybody there. You can also see all our backers, the stories behind the scene, our mirror blogs.
Cool.
Yep.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much. And shout out to this awesome collaboration that we're doing for season 5. I guess I'll end with this. Season 5 would not be possible without you guys. I am a big believer in what you're doing. I'm super excited to kind of see you guys spearhead the forefront as to what Web3 social is and what it's going to become. So really excited to be working with you guys and to kind of like discover the vision and learn more. Till next time.